You're in the right place. This is the Eatfluencer Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Maggie Landis. Together, we are going to unpack everything about eating and discover the what, when, and how that will let you lead your best life. This is not your doctor's conversation about nutrition. Today is when you can start to love eating again. Let food be food and you be you. Get ready to get Eatfluenced. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Eatfluencer Podcast. Yay, I'm glad you're here. If you're a new listener, I'm happy to have you. If you are a returning customer or listener, I'm thrilled that you came back. This conversation today is going to be a juicy one. So we are on episode 47 called Revisiting Our Old Friend, the BMI. Now, there's a lot to talk about here. Obviously, I want to tell you that I did a complete episode on BMI. It was episode number 16, and I went into quite a detailed history about the origin of the BMI, where it came from 200 years ago, because that is where it came from, and went through sort of the evolution of that measure being adopted in mainstream health. So today we're going to just briefly review that, but today's conversation is a little more about, and now what? And now how is it being used? And how is it potentially damaging our relationship with our healthcare providers? How is it keeping us stuck in diet culture? Sort of this is the current BMI conversation. So I want to let you know, if you haven't listened to episode 16, you should consider popping back into that and listening to that one to get the historical background first, and then coming back over to us here and listening to this part. The other thing too is, if you like conversations like this and it stimulates questions in your brain, or you're wondering other related things, I'd love to have you in my private Facebook group. This is what we do in the Facebook group. It is free. I am happy to get you an invitation if you'll just DM me the word Facebook on either Instagram or Facebook, and I'll get you right there. Okay, so I want to just put that out there if this conversation doesn't seem complete to you. But let's get in to the chat today. So first, I'm going to give a trigger warning that we're talking BMI today. And that involves talking a little bit about weight and overweight and obesity and all that vocabulary that my fingers are getting tired of air quotes, but I'm doing an awful lot of air quotes over here on this end of the microphone. I just want you to know, if you are in a place or a recovery from an eating disorder, or not in a mental place where hearing this conversation is going to serve you, then I want you to skip, and I'll see you next week. But let's just pause for a second here. Now, I'm not particularly one who plays into this snowflake culture, sensationalized, every word is a trigger of something. But I do think there are certain things, that we need to be aware of. There are also a lot of things that have been blown way out of proportion. But this isn't it. This is not. This is not this egomaniacal snowflake culture. I have to give you a trigger warning, because that is how bad the BMI has treated people. How bad this weight-centered perspective on health has landed us. It's not just sort of not nice to talk about obesity. It is flat out discriminatory, and the healthcare sector is traumatizing people and weaponizing this stupid math calculation, and we're doing it in the healthcare system. That's not okay with me, and that, my friends, should not be okay with you either. So that's some of the dirt that we are kicking around today. And I hope you'll, really pause and just think Not to be nitpicky about the language, but the language of this stuff really matters. And we're going to talk a little bit about that first here. A lot of people ask me frequently why I don't like the words obesity or overweight. This is all in air quotes, okay? And I didn't understand that for a really long time either, because it was a very clinical word. I mean, that's what we're trained in school, is that, if you're a such and such a BMI, then you're overweight. If you're in such and such a BMI, you're obese, or you're morbidly obese, or you're underweight, or whatever. To me, it didn't have any kind of pejorative meaning. But I was wrong, and I've learned more, and I want you to keep an open mind to what you potentially could learn too. These are just arbitrary categories. So when we say overweight, that's just a number. That's a BMI number, which is made up, which is arbitrary and made up. And then we put you in a category using that number, which is arbitrary and made up. And because of your categorization, we validate an attitude of body type discrimination and weight stigmatization. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that we are concocting a systematic modality of oppression, and we're using it in healthcare. So tell me, what is overweight? Over what weight? I mean, the whole word over means that there's like a, quote, normal number, a normal limit, and you are over it, right? You are overdrawn in your checking account, you are underwater. I mean, there's like some sort of boundary. Well, that totally gives no acknowledgement whatsoever to body size diversity, which is like a real thing. Okay, so we don't call short people under height, or, blonde people are like under brunettes, or people with mental disabilities as under smart. Can you even imagine? What if we started doing that? We would be in the freaking Supreme Court. You can't discriminate against people like that. But yet we have this overweight, obesity size category in medicine and health, and we use it all the time. We make it a judgment of character and this, sine qua non definition of health, and it is not true. It's not even true in the science. And what science am I talking about? Well, really what I'm talking about here is health at every size. And we've talked about this. I've done podcast episodes specifically about health at every size. It is a movement or a way of thinking. This was started by Dr. Lindo Bacon, who published the original book and did most of the original research on health at every size. And it's simple, in its most simple form. It means that health can be attained. Health promoting behaviors can be taken on at every size. That's it. It's the same as if we were to say health is attainable in every gender, or at every age, or at every height, or every skin color. See, you get it? But that all seems right. I mean, that seems like, well, yeah, duh, of course. But when we talk about health at every size body, and we start talking about obesity and BMI and this marginalizing language, everybody digs their heels in and says, oh, no. This is like some sort of fringe idea. But what the science has shown over and over and over is that health and weight are very, very tangentially related, if they are even related at all. And they are certainly not related in a direct causal relationship. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about that. And we've talked about this before, but it just bears repeating. Causal or associative are different. Correlative and causal are different. All right. So associative or correlative relationships mean that two things are trending together. They have a higher frequency at the same time. They occur more often simultaneously. Okay? That's all that means. It does not mean that one causes the other. And that is probably the number one most misunderstood thing of any kind of like health headline, news headline. And this is where people that are not trained to evaluate literature, are not scientists, do not understand how statistics and sort of data collection works, they just take the headline and run. But what you have to do when you find a associative or correlative relationship, it is possible that it's causative also, but you have to prove that separately. So what you have to do is dig into the data, and that involves the data of who's collected the data, who are the subjects, how long was this going, were the variables controlled, all these things. You have to go deep and figure this out and uncover if you believe there to be a single causative factor that you can isolate, and then study that. All right. And that's really challenging to do. And we've talked about how challenging, research in human nutrition is because of the fact that we're always eating all the time. And it's very, very challenging, ergo impossible to control tightly. And we're looking for outcomes that are very far in the future. And there's a lot of compounding variables and all this, nerdy statistical talk. But just because two things happen simultaneously or trend together in frequency does not mean they are causative. So here's an example that's simple, but this might make it really clear to you. So there is a higher rate of melanoma and invasive skin cancer in California than there is in Alaska. Okay? But living in California does not cause the skin cancer. Okay, the underlying factor when you start comparing California to Alaska is that in California, the weather is warmer. More people are outside more days of the year. There's more exposed sun. There's more exposed skin. So while the trend is that melanoma is more common in California than Alaska, we can say that is associated. But for an individual person living in California, that doesn't mean they're going to get skin cancer. It doesn't mean that if you live in California and you wear long sleeves and you stay inside or you wear sunscreen or whatever, that you have any more risk than a person living in Alaska. Then the trend basically does not apply to you at an individual level. So what this means is that the surface level categorization has nothing to do with the development of the outcome at stake. And usually there is a unidentified, sort of underlying behavior or quality that actually modifies the risk. Okay? Another example. So your power bill goes up in the summer. I've said this one before. You've probably heard this one before. Your electricity bill is more expensive in the summer, especially if you live in Texas. And the sales of ice cream goes up in the summer. Okay? So that doesn't mean that if you purchase ice cream, your electricity bill is going to go up. Okay? The common factor is that it's summer. It's hot as heck. Your AC's running all the time. And you also choose to purchase more ice cream because there's more times when you want to eat ice cream in the summer than there is in the middle of the winter. Is it starting to make a little bit of sense? So the deal is that when we say obesity or overweight is going to make you have diabetes, that's like saying living in California will make you have skin cancer. Okay, that the underlying factor that causes diabetes or stroke or heart disease or whatever health condition is not actually the body. It is something else. Is it inflammation? Is it, something to do with the vasculature? Is it there's a lot of science in figuring out what is the underlying factor, because if we want to prevent the outcome, we want to address the underlying factor. But what Health at Every Size is saying in summary is the categorization of the body type is actually not related to health, and that there are people who can be healthy in all bodies, and that could be a small body or a large body, and there's people that are unhealthy, and that could be a small body or a large body. So let's focus on the factors that might be contributing to those health outcomes and not be so distracted by the conversation about the body. All right? But I know what's happening in the doctor's office. I know that this weight-centric approach to everything, this is not what's being generally purveyed. So instead of actually taking our precious little skinny, narrow window of time with our patients, talking about access to food, eating behaviors, diversifying the diet, hydrating, avoiding being sedentary, psychological support, stress reduction, sleep, all this sort of stuff, we are so distracted by this obesity and overweight category and the BMI and the charts and all this stuff that we make that the epicenter of the visit. And, the thing is, we miss such an opportunity, all right, because these things that really do probably, impact your health in a very direct way, all those things I mentioned, being sedentary versus being active, having access to food, having a diverse diet, those things will improve your health if you start adopting some of those behaviors independent of what happens to your body. So it is possible that you take on these behaviors and your body does not shrink. Your body may stay the same. In fact, there's even a possibility your body will get larger. But if you are pursuing these health behaviors that are actionable, almost certainly your health will be better. That is Health at Every Size. It is not saying that every size person is healthy. That is not true. We have many unhealthy people in many sizes. It's saying that health promotion can occur and health can be improved independent of size. So here's another thing. Here's another analogy. I love me some analogies. This is going to make it super horrifying, actually. But we talked about, the association with obesity and diabetes. I'm just going to use that as the line here. Now, diet culture will tell you that being obese causes diabetes. And so the way to prevent diabetes is to prevent being obese. Well, that's not how it works, okay? There's also associative data that shows that there's a higher incidence of diabetes in poor people. So the idea that we screen patients with a BMI in the clinic and then we use that information to tell them whether they have a higher or lower probability of developing diabetes, that would be on par with your doctor telling you to bring your tax return to the next visit, and they're going to look at it and see how much money you make, because if your income is below a certain level, then you're going to get diabetes. Can you even imagine? Can you imagine if that happened? But that is truly as arbitrary. And of course you would say, well, no, just because I'm poor doesn't mean I'm going to have diabetes. Just because I'm rich doesn't mean that I won't have diabetes. And the same thing happens with bodies. We're telling people in big bodies they are going to have disease without even asking about the underlying health behaviors. And we're telling people in slender bodies that they're not going to have disease and not asking them about their health behaviors either. So we are doing a total disservice to all people. You don't get the right advice on either side of the spectrum. So why don't we just stop talking about the bodies? To me, that is just the obvious answer that is in blazing orange neon lights. Like, let's just take the number out of that. Wouldn't that feel good? Wouldn't that feel good if you could go to the doctor, get actual tactical health promoting strategy, and you did not feel like it was unattainable or didn't apply to you because you were too big? Or you go in a small body and you have disordered eating or an eating disorder or a psychiatric condition or food insecurity or whatever the thing is, and you're not essentially congratulated for it when you really do need some very specific resources that nobody will find out if they don't ask. We've got to ask the questions, folks. If you're listening to this and you're a health provider, a dietitian, a PA, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a therapist, whatever, we've got to ask. The bottom line is we won't know until we ask, and we got to ask the right questions, not what is your BMI? I mean, I hope that I've made that just crystal clear that is derailing what we could be doing in the health system. So all that to say, here's the deal. I'm trying to change the system. Trust me, I am using every modality within my own personal means to try to do this. But in the meantime, you're going to have to navigate and change your own personal individual environment. So if being weighed at the doctor or being weighed by your personal trainer or whatever it is feels like it's going to set you back, you don't have to do it. With very, very few exceptions in adults, a daily weight or a current weight is not relevant to what's going on in a visit. There are a few exceptions to that rule, and those are the outliers. All right? We operate in healthcare with informed consent. We have an informed consent model. And all the patients and all the providers understand that extends to surgery and blood transfusions and vaccines and testing and this and that and the other. But that also extends to getting on the scale. And if it does not affect the delivery of your care at that time for that problem, and you feel like the risks of being weighed outweigh the benefits, in that moment you can say no. And that may be the first time you've ever heard that. But you know what? I encourage you to try. You may be surprised how not a big deal it is to the person who just asked you to get on the scale. And I know it sounds hard and uncomfortable and confrontational, but it doesn't have to feel that way. And I have some strategies, some talking points, some real life scripting and practical advice that will help you conquer the clinic visit without being totally derailed by the scale. Because I want you to go back to your doctor. The worst possible thing is to not go to any doctor. When you leave the healthcare system altogether, that is the setup for bad going to worse in a hot minute. And I don't want that to happen. So it's really important to me that we as healthcare providers try to change this conversation and learn about health at every size science and really understand what's going on when we put the patients on the scale and we flag them with a BMI and a label. But for individual people, I want you to feel resilient and empowered, and I want you to go to the doctor. So I came up with something to help you. I'm doing a live workshop September 23rd. If you're listening to this in real time, that's 3.5 weeks from now. I want you to consider coming. All right. It is called Getting Care Out of Your Health Care. And it is basically a blueprint to conquer the doctor's visit or the doctor's office when everything always goes to weight. We've talked about that. It is such a problem. So many women, as we have discussed before, weight is the problem. Weight is always the reason. Weight is the underlying issue with every chief complaint. And the solution always becomes weight loss when you look at it like that. And when that is the situation, you are not getting the health care and the full scope of health promoting opportunities or health solutions that you deserve or that you want. So this workshop that I'm doing is going to walk you through some mindset and some actual scripting, some tips on how to set boundaries, what exactly to say, how to say it, what to do, which questions to ask. I want you to feel like you can get what you want and what you need out of any doctor's visit in any size body. And this can happen as soon as September. So I put that out there because it's related to what we're talking about today. And I just want you to stay in the healthcare system and not have a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety about it, and certainly not cancel appointments and avoid going, because like I said, that is just, your doctor has expertise in health, and we need to connect that with your health needs and not have the scale and the BMI like blockading that communication and that work that can be done inside the clinic walls. So I hope this workshop will be something you enjoy and that you'll consider participating in. It's really like boots on the ground kind of solution that so many people need and have asked me for. And so I've went ahead and put this together. All the links to find out more about it and the registration link will be in the show notes, or you can look on my Instagram or on my website and find all the details. All right. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to continuing more in the Facebook group, and however you wish to connect with me, then there's a new Eatfluencer podcast every Wednesday. So thanks for joining us today. Until next time. Thank you so much for being here today. If you love what you've learned, follow me on social media at Maggie Landis MD, and you'll never miss a thing. You can also check out my website at maggielandismd.com and sign up to be part of our community of eaters. Thanks again for stopping by. We'll talk again soon.